Hello and welcome to The Art and Science of AI, a podcast about the science of how AI works and the art of using AI to reimagine your life, business, and society. I'm Nikhil. I'm one of your co-hosts. I'm an AI product manager and I love talking about AI.
I'm Piyush, your other co-host. I'm a AI sales executive, and I love learning about AI and talking about AI. Nikhil, I feel like I have been totally cut off from the world of AI or the world of news in general because life has become very busy over the last 1 month. So I would love to know what's going on. Like I know in the world of AI, things move very quickly, and things have been moving really, really quickly over the last few years. So I imagine a lot of developments have happened since Apple Intelligence launch. So why don't you give me a rundown on like what's been going on in the world of AI?
Yeah. So last we talked about new stuff was like when we did our podcast on Apple Intelligence. That was around mid to end of June. So today is August 2nd. I think we'll plan to launch this and release this episode in a couple of days. So I just looked up I mean, of course, I've been tracking what's going on for the last month or so, but I highlighted a couple of key things that we can talk about that I think are interesting developments in the AI world. We can start with actually just talking about what's going on with Apple Intelligence. We talked about it last time, and they had initially said it was going to be launching together with the new iPhone release, which is typically in September. I don't know if they've released a date for that yet. So when the new iPhone model comes out, usually the way they do it is they say, okay, the iPhone is released, it's available today, and also the new version of the operating system is available today. So the new iPhones have the new operating system, and these Apple Intelligence features are built into the new operating system. I think it's iOS version 18 is the new one that's coming out.
Hmm.
Recently, they announced that that's actually not going to be the case, and there are delays, and it's not going to be available on launch. It's going to come out maybe in October or maybe even a couple of months after the launch. And that too, only like some of the features are going to be available in October, and many of the features that they promised likely won't be there until next year. So that's kind of been the latest update on Apple Intelligence. And we don't really know exactly why this is happening. I think it's just taking them longer to figure out some of the issues around possibly like security, privacy, getting the models to work is we've seen this, right, in the past that we've talked about how getting to like 95% is easy and then solving the last 5% or last 2% is really the challenging part. Same with like self-driving cars, same with all different AI applications. And
Do
I
you
think
think
they're
Elon Musk's tweet or the noise he made about potentially banning all iPhones from Tesla had something to do with the delay, or is just
I don't
noise?
think that one in particular, but maybe in general, the thinking through how privacy and security works is definitely a complicated issue. And there've been many security incidents since then. I don't know if you followed like CrowdStrike, which recently impacted so many Windows computers, like pretty much um, a large percentage of computers running any version of Windows just got bricked. Like they got instantly shut down for a long period of time. And this impacted many critical services like hospitals, flights, and all these places that use Windows computers to run their operations. So, yeah, that was pretty significant like impact to Microsoft negatively. And Microsoft also faced the issue earlier of their AI features in recall being hacked, and so they locked that down. So I think just operating system providers are the most vulnerable to any like security implications, and they kind of need to be really careful. And we
Mhm.
talked about last time how this is a double-edged sword because yes, on the one hand, if the operating systems are in have tight control over everything, there's better security, but then it stifles innovation and it doesn't let other people
Right.
take part in that innovation and providing AI assistance and stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the Apple stuff is delayed. How do you feel about that as an iPhone user? Were you excited? Are you bummed?
Yeah, I was excited. Actually, I recently upgraded my iPhone from the iPhone 13 Pro to the iPhone 15 Pro. And I was excited because Apple actually, one of the things they announced was that Apple Intelligence would be available only for the iPhone 15 Pro and upwards. So I finally got that device that will enable me to use it. But yeah, it'll be a while till it comes out. I'm excited. But like I said, it really depends on whether the apps I use are going to choose to integrate with it or not. And I have no idea. So far, we
Right.
haven't seen any indication of um, app developers whether they're going to start using that or not. So yeah, we'll just have to wait and see. I think it'll be like slower progress than what we initially thought. But
Hmm.
another interesting thing, so maybe there are a couple of related things. One is I think this is part of a trend of, in general, companies announcing AI things that are not coming out anytime soon, or like over promising on the launch date and then further delaying it. We saw with ChatGPT maybe a month before the Apple announcement, they announced their new voice assistant, the ChatGPT voice mode.
Scarlett
Uh,
Johansson one.
yeah, exactly. And then they changed the voice of that later. But that's something, when they announced it 2 months ago, they said, oh, it's coming out in weeks. And it hasn't come out till now. And I think recently there was a tweet from Sam Altman saying, okay, it's going to start rolling out to some test users in the next few weeks or something like that. But yeah, it's been slow. And I think this is kind of a general trend we're seeing, which is kind of annoying, like,
It's
because,
very annoying. I mean, especially
yeah.
with software, you'd expect that it should be announced close to, if not, well, here's this amazing thing that your phones already have now. Why don't you try it out? Wouldn't that be such a nicer
That's how it
experience?
used to be
Yeah.
back in the Steve Jobs era. When Steve Jobs was running Apple, he loved doing these very showmanship type announcements where he'd come on stage, talk about all this cool stuff, and then he ended by saying, "And all this is available today. Like, go buy the new iPhone."
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
that was awesome. But yeah, now stuff has changed. I don't know what it is. I think there's also like a lot of pressure from investors, and yeah, I think a lot of it is investor pressure. Like, companies are under pressure to show that they are innovating and that they're launching new AI things. So even before it's fully ready, they want to, project a front as if they have something before it fully is, just to give confidence to investors, to the market, and things like that. That's the main reason I can think of.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of things are now happening addressing the investors more than the end users or the employees. Not just,
Yeah, that's true.
yeah.
I mean, of
Maybe
course,
that's just a
companies
sign of the times that we live in.
like public companies are responsible ultimately to their investors and
Yeah, but that's
shareholders.
always been the case. But I feel like just more recently, it's been very investor led. The recent layoffs, a lot of signaling is done to the investors, not so much to the employees or the end users of the companies. I feel like could be wrong,
Yeah.
but
That's true. We'll have to see how this trend plays out. I think that tends to happen, especially in times like this of uncertainty, when there's a
mhm.
new technology coming out and every company is worried about how it's going to transform their business model. So I think in these times of higher uncertainty, it becomes more important to kind of signal comfort to the investors, or at least like signal that, like, hey, we got this covered, something like that.
Right. Yeah, makes sense. So, anything
Another
exciting that happened?
Yeah, just to finish up on the Apple AI thing, another interesting thing that happened, which I wanted to talk about, it actually connects to this security issue we talked about, is Apple decided and announced that Apple Intelligence is not going to come to the European Union. In EU, there's just going to be no Apple Intelligence. That's only going to be limited to geographies outside of the EU. And
Why?
that's
I know the EU is generally very difficult with regulations, but why? This seems like a big thing, right? Like EU
It
users
is a
will not
big
have
thing, and
access to
actually,
this amazing
it's
thing.
yeah, it's not just limited to Apple. The next big thing I want to talk about is some Meta announcements. Meta released some new models, and they also said they won't be coming to the EU.
Uh,
We'll talk about the Meta announcements in a minute, but yeah, I think it's worth talking about this EU thing and what's going on there. Mark Zuckerberg said that this is due to the unpredictable nature of the European regulatory environment that we're not going to be launching in the EU. And Apple, I don't know if they released an official statement on this, but it is due to similar concerns. So the European Union has been at the forefront of regulating the tech industry for the past, like at least decade or so, I would say, ever since the
Yeah,
GDPR came out and stuff.
yeah.
And it's just been increasing a lot more. Over the past few years, it's gotten a lot more intense, the kind of regulations they're imposing. The most recent and significant of the European regulations is this thing called the Digital Markets Act, the DMA, and it puts a whole host of regulations on especially like large companies. And their idea, I mean, I think the idea behind it is good, but the implementation is flawed in many ways. The idea is that we don't want these big companies to have a monopoly, and we want to be able to promote competition and innovation from smaller companies and startups. So they impose requirements like, for example, interoperability is one thing. They're like, hey, whatever services, if you Apple or you Meta are launching some kind of like new feature or service, like that can't be something that's only unique to your platform. You have to make it interoperable with other people. So one of the key things actually there is messaging. So they're saying that messaging has to be interoperable. Like so, Apple has iMessage, right? And that you can't just limit iMessage to Apple users. That you have to make that somehow interoperable with people outside of um, the Apple ecosystem. And then there's like Meta has WhatsApp, and I think they have some interoperability requirements. I don't know exactly the details, but maybe one version of this is that they want you to be able to use other apps to interact, to message with users on WhatsApp and things like that. But it's, I mean, the idea behind it is good, but it's getting very messy in terms of the details because they're having to dictate to these big companies how to design their products. And I think we're getting to a certain point where the companies are like, okay, like, at this point, we'd rather just not make a product for your continent, your geography, because
But
it's too
even that is a
invasive.
huge decision. It's a huge market. I mean,
It-
not just in terms of users, but also in terms of revenue that you get from that region, right? Like you, for example, you get a lot more users from India, but I can bet that you get a lot more revenue from the EU region. Like per capita, the user is worth a lot more in EU than is in South Asian markets. So it must be not
Yeah,
just a
but
hit
I
from you.
think overall it's here. Maybe I can just look it up. Let's see, like what's Meta's revenue breakdown by geographies. I think as far as I know, it's not that significant in the EU. Like if you look at the total, so here I don't want to put a percentage on it, but it looks like I don't know, maybe like 10% or something like that is
That's
what it seems
surprising to
like.
me. I would have imagined at least like 20, 25%. So, okay. I mean, it's still
Um,
huge for like these are giant companies. 10% is like more than like it's an order of magnitude of tens of billions of dollars.
Yeah, it is huge. And I think it's interesting that this is happening. And so, specifically, the reason why it's happening, we talked about this interoperability, right? So, the way it would impact Apple in this case is we talked about this last time that they may have to expose these intelligence capabilities to other AI providers. Right now, the way it works is that only Apple can provide an AI assistant. Only Siri can be
Right.
the AI assistant that integrates all of your knowledge and everything and answers your questions for you. So I think they are worried that as part of these interoperability requirements in the EU, they will be required to expose this functionality and this data to third-party AI assistants. And they're worried that that's a privacy and security risk. So they're like, hey, we just don't want to do it.
Right. And if enough people refrain from launching such cool new features in the EU, maybe that would force EU to reconsider some of these very stringent regulations, right? Like you said that Mark Zuckerberg's not happy with them. I know Google's not happy with a few of the
Yeah. Yeah,
privacy.
it's not clear, or maybe they're just okay with it. I don't know to what extent the like European population is on board with everything that their governments are doing. Maybe it's just that, hey, culturally Europeans like care about this stuff and they're like, it's okay if we don't get the latest tech innovations. But I don't know. Yeah, I mean, the economy in the EU also, as far as I know, is not doing as well. Like there's not a lot of tech innovation in the EU, and they are, I think, like falling behind on technology and AI specifically, and the regulatory landscape is certainly not helping. So yeah, I don't know. It's a complicated issue, but it
Another
was
one of
just
those things that will
interesting.
be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, and it's interesting that multiple large companies have made this same decision, like Apple and Meta, two of the largest companies and two of the largest, like Meta AI, their AI is probably going to be used by the most number of people in the world. Apple Intelligence also, like, is going to be huge. And yeah, if that's being excluded from the EU, that's interesting. I'm also curious about, I mean, there are also like efforts in the US, I think, to start regulating some of this stuff. And we don't know how that's going to play out. I think in general, a lot of it will probably depend on the political landscape and choices we face right now between the Republicans and the Democrats. Although, to be honest, like both sides have been very anti-big tech so far. So
Yeah,
I
there's
don't
very
know if,
few things that are in common between the Democrats and the Republicans. Not liking Silicon Valley is one of them, I suppose.
yeah, that's true. I think a lot of people in Silicon Valley actually have come out in favor of the Republican Party. Most famously, recently, Mark Andreessen and Ben Horowitz, who run Andreessen Horowitz, like one of the most famous like venture capital firms in Silicon Valley. But their perspective is they're saying that they want to represent the voice of little tech, not big tech. So yes, everyone in government, I think right now loves to dunk on big tech. So Republicans, Democrats alike, they're like, yeah, big tech is bad. But yeah, I think for little tech, there a lot of people seem to be more favoring the Republican Party versus the Democratic Party. Although I'm not really sure if that is a reasonable position or not. Recently, the Republicans announced J.D. Vance as the vice presidential candidate, and he has spoken out in favor of the current administration's like tech regulation policy, especially as it concerns mergers and acquisitions. Like one of the big things that the Biden administration has done right now is made mergers and acquisitions extremely difficult. And that hurts both big tech and little tech because big tech buys small companies as ways to grow their innovation portfolios, and small companies and investors often depend on big tech buying these companies out as a way to get return on their investment and as an exit opportunity. So that's something that's been locked down in the current administration, and yeah, it's unclear if either
Yeah,
choice
I
in the
think
upcoming.
one I don't know, this is a possible reason, but uh, one different approach that Anderson Horowitz took over the last few years is focusing a lot more on crypto, and they see
Mm.
crypto as the answer to big tech, like being building on the crypto rails, so to speak, might be um, like Web 3.0. That's how they define it, right? Like if the big tech was Web 2.0, then crypto would be Web 3.0. And maybe one of the reasons they are favoring Republicans is they feel that Republicans would be more amenable to the crypto ecosystem because they made a huge bet on crypto.
I
So I
think
don't
you're
know.
absolutely right. Yeah, I had totally forgotten about this, but yeah, what you said is 100% correct. Like Andreessen Horowitz really believes in Web 3.0 crypto as the way to kind of disrupt big tech. They're like, hey, like these big tech companies have these dominant network effects and platforms, and there's no way for any one individual player to disrupt that. But if we can create some decentralized platforms, then those could rise up to that same level. And I don't understand the details of it too much, but I do know that a lot of the concept of this decentralized platforms are based on crypto technologies. And yes, I think the governments have been opposed to that. But I'm not 100% sure if this is correct, but I recently read somewhere that Trump used to be anti-crypto, but kind of recently changed his mind on that and is now more okay with crypto. So
Which
yeah,
is
I think
very
that's
surprising to me. Like, if anyone, I would imagine that Trump would be very against. Well, I don't know crypto, but Bitcoin in general, because it's kind of a threat to the U.S. dollar, right? Like, I feel like all political parties should be opposed to Bitcoin because it's like supposed to be positioned as a contender towards a global currency, which currently US dollar
Hmm.
is. So, like, why would you be in favor of that if you're trying to be on the side of the US government? But I don't know.
That's
Maybe
true. I
there's
mean,
more.
but crypto goes beyond Bitcoin, right?
Correct, correct.
Like Bitcoin is one, so you could be maybe opposed to Bitcoin and digital currencies, but you could still
Yeah,
be open to other forms of crypto.
for
I
sure.
don't have much knowledge of this, but yeah, I think that's an interesting thing to look at. So yeah, regulatory landscape is definitely going to have a lot of impact on the future of AI, and that's something we should watch out for.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's everything on Apple and regulation. So we actually can jump to something like a little more exciting in terms of like the other like big announcement that came out in the past month is Meta's launches. There are a couple of launches, and I want to share a short um, video from Mark Zuckerberg himself where he's announcing these. So let's jump into that. Okay, let's start.
Mark Zuckerberg is having a total
Everyone, we got another
transformation.
big AI release today. First, Meta AI is on track to reach our goal of becoming the most used AI assistant in the world by the end of the year. There are hundreds of millions of people using it already, and we keep making it smarter and freely available in more countries. Today, we're upgrading Meta AI with our newest model, Llama 3.1, which will also be the first open source model at the frontier and among the most advanced out there. It's a really big improvement. Smarter, supports more languages, better reasoning, just better overall. I'm going to go deeper on Llama 3.1 in just a minute. But over the next couple of weeks, we're also adding a couple new features. Meta AI's Imagine feature that generates images fast as you type will also let you put yourself in your images in any style and doing almost anything that you can think of. So I think that's going to be quite a bit of fun. We're also getting closer to releasing a tool that you can use to create your own AIs to interact with across our apps. So more on that soon. Now, for more details on Llama 3.1, we're releasing by far the most advanced open source model at 405 billion parameters. It's got 88.6 mmLU and some state of the art benchmarks ahead of any closed model on math, reasoning, tool use, and long context. It's a big deal. It's going to be more affordable to run than similar closed models. And because it's open, you're going to be able to use it to fine tune, distill, and train your own models of any size that you want. We're also releasing updated 70 billion and 8 billion parameter models that we've distilled from the 405, and those are now the leading open source models for their sizes. I think that open source AI is going to become the industry standard, just like Linux did. It gives you control to customize and run your own models. You don't have to send your data to another company, and it's more affordable. I also think that the transparency and scrutiny are going to make open source AI safer and more secure, just like other open source software. We've done rigorous testing on all of our models. And of course, since they're open, everyone can do their own testing as well. We are partnering with a lot of companies to make it easier for everyone to use Llama. AWS and Databricks are launching services for fine tuning and distilling your own models. NVIDIA supports fine tuning and synthetic data generation with their AI Foundry. Grok has built low latency inference. Scale.ai and Accenture are working with enterprises to adopt Llama. And of course, you're going to be able to access the models on all of the major clouds, including AWS, Azure, Google, and Oracle. If you want to go deeper, I just posted a letter on Threads on why I believe that open source is the path forward. So go check it out. Check out the upgraded Meta AI and let me know what you think. Hey, everyone, we got another big AI.
Okay, what did you think?
It's it sounds like open source is catching up to the closed source model quite quickly, which
Yes, I think that's one of the biggest takeaways here.
yeah,
The way Zuck phrased it, he said Llama 3.1 is by far the most advanced open source model, but he could have easily just said this is by far the most advanced model, like
right,
without using that qualifier open
right,
source.
right.
And it's
Actually,
most of the benchmarks have shown.
one of the future episodes, maybe it might be a good idea to deep dive into what does it really mean when we say closed source AI model versus an open source? I think I have a general idea, but I don't think I have the kind of understanding that I usually like to have about these subjects. So,
Yeah, for sure. We can do that more deeper in one episode, but maybe just to share like the basic idea of it. The difference between open source and closed source is that if it's a closed source model, like that software um, only runs on that company's own servers. You cannot in any way download the model or do anything with it yourself. You can't customize it. You can't change it. You can just use the model, and you have to pay the company to do that. So if it's OpenAI, the way to use their model is they provide the UI through ChatGPT or they provide an API, and you just send some request to that model, and you get an output from it. But if it's an open source model, you can download the model yourself on your computer if it's large enough. You can modify it in any way you want, and you can run it wherever you want. You can run it on your own computer, you can run it on your own server, and you don't have to pay anyone for that. You're only paying for the cost of your own hardware. So that's kind of the main
but in the case
distinction.
of these AI models, like he said that the latest one has 400 and something billion parameters. Could you really modify that? Like, could anyone really understand? Like, what would that even undertake? Like, modifying an
Yeah,
open
so
source AI model. Maybe that's
this,
something that we can deep dive on when we talk about this
yeah.
in more detail.
So
But
this is one important caveat, and I will say like an open source AI model is not as open as like a traditional open source software, because in a traditional open source software, I see the source code
right,
and I can go and modify lines of that source code to do whatever I want. But in this case, it doesn't make sense to go and modify parameters of a model. Like no one knows how to do that. So,
right.
but what he did say was that they're releasing methods to fine tune it.
Hmm.
So they are releasing ways in which you can do that. And of
Right.
course, you could argue that OpenAI also lets you fine tune their models. But again, like the level of customizability that's possible with that is less and is more expensive to do it with a closed model and so on. So I
I
think,
mean, just the ability of downloading the model and running it on your system is huge. Like that difference is huge. You can do that with
yes.
Llama, but you can't do that with other.
Absolutely. I'll share like an example from my own household. Like I was having this argument with my wife Rukma about how like I'm really into this AI tech, right? So I'm like, oh, it would be so cool if we could have an AI that like listens to our conversations and helps us and suggests like things for us to do or like helps us like when we have misunderstandings and things like that. And
I can already see where the disagreement began.
she's super opposed to this. She's like, there's no way I would feel comfortable in normal being myself and just having a normal conversation if I know that all of this data is going to OpenAI or Meta or Google or some company like that. But interestingly, we did, after some negotiation, come to an agreement that one possible thing we could try is if I set up my own AI model, like in-house, that's on my own computer or my own server, where the data is never leaving, my premises and going to any cloud, then she would be more comfortable like trying that.
By the way,
So,
related to that, I was having a similar discussion with my wife on like I have a 2 year old, and a lot of our discussions after having our daughter is like, what would the world look like when she grows up, right? Because it's so uncertain and it's so hard to predict, but it's that's also the fun of it, right? You can like play these games where you try to predict what will happen. And one of the predictions I have, and I feel very strongly about this, is that by the time she grows up, the world that she will inhabit, everyone in that world will always assume that they're always being recorded or listened to. And because it's that is what normal would be like, everyone will be okay with it. Just that's the normal. Like right now, we don't operate like that, but in 20 years, that's the world that we will all live in, is at every time, maybe not in the privacy of your home, but if you're out and about, you most certainly are being recorded and listened to, and people will be like, well, that's just normal, I guess.
I actually agree with you. I think that's spot on. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or not, but I
Yeah.
do see that that's the direction in which we're headed. and you already see there are tons of devices that enable this. You can buy, they're both hardware and software devices that let you do this. On the hardware side, you get these pendants that have become pretty popular, where you
Mm.
can wear it around your neck or clip it to your pocket or something like that, and it's just always on recording. So it is recording every single conversation you ever have. And right now, the capabilities are kind of limited. You can do things like remind you of things. You can be like, hey, last week I spoke to this person, remind me, what did they tell me? Or like, someone maybe recommended some movie to you or book or something and you just forgot about it. And so it's just like memory on steroids. It just helps
Right.
you remember things. That's one thing. And it has many other benefits, I guess, it maybe helps you do tasks and stuff. If like you had conversations and you were supposed to do something and then you forgot, well, again, this ties back to memory, I guess, but it also helps with things like creativity. Like if you want to write something or write a message or write a blog post or something, it could help by having access to your personal context. There's a lot of stuff. There's also software applications. Today I was having a call with someone on Google Meet, and for the first time I saw it, then it said this person's assistant also joined that call on Google Meet. It was an AI assistant, and what it does is it transcribes the recording and takes notes and sends like a meeting summary and next steps and things like that.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, there are all these implications to how like productivity will be impacted, like you just mentioned. But it also has some very interesting psychological and sociological implications, right? Like if we're living in
hmm
a world where we know for a fact that every single act of ours is being observed, recorded, being listened to, like how would we behave as humans? It's very interesting to think of the implications, right? Like how would we
yeah,
behave? How would our society behave? Like it's almost as if, like, back when most people believed in God, what they believed in was that there is this entity which is always watching over us, so we should behave in accordance, right? Like, and then there's like all of these other beliefs that we had is like if we behave badly, then this entity he is keeping a record and will be punished accordingly, or if we behave in a good way, then we'll be given like go to heaven or something. And it's interesting, like now we actually might inhabit a world where we know for a fact that this will be the case, where there will be this super intelligent entity that will always watch us and will know
that's
exactly what
true.
we're up to,
Yeah.
and I wonder how we'll behave.
I mean, it's not clear that it will be one super intelligent entity. It could just be ultimately like,
Yeah.
Meta and Amazon and Google, and these are the companies that have this data. Yeah, I think it is a fascinating topic. I recently started wearing my Meta Ray-Ban glasses. You've seen them. I love wearing them around. But I think it makes a lot of people uncomfortable, I've noticed, when I wear these glasses, and then someone is like, "Oh, hey, are you recording me?" I think these things are super cool because I can go around and take like hands-free photographs and videos and ask AI questions. But it's gotten me to think more that, hey, this may be not normal and
So
people
actually,
don't
that was
react
the prediction I was
positively.
making, is what I predict will happen is that everyone will be comfortable with it, and not only comfortable, they just assume that that's what's happening. Like I'm being, so let's say you start interacting with someone, a stranger on the road, your default assumption that will be that this person is recording me, and you just be okay with it. Like that's what our world will be like. Like everyone would be okay with it because that's exactly what happens. Like everyone would do that.
I
Which
agree with you with respect to your daughter's generation. I think by the time she grows up, like 20 years down
yeah.
the line, that will be the norm. Is we're not there yet.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah, for
even
sure.
when we get there, it's very possible there will be a generational difference between people in our generation
For
who
sure.
are like not comfortable with it and people in her generation who are okay with it. So yeah, I don't know how it'll play out. But
But
it, it
anyways, we,
it's
we digress. Coming back to Meta's announcement, so it is kind of cool to see that this open source model is, like you were saying, he could have very well said that this is the one of the most advanced models, period, that didn't have to qualify.
Yeah, because that's what's been shown in the latest benchmarks is that it's just a little bit behind
Yeah, what is that thing he
GPT-4.
mentioned? Like 86 mm. I've seen that abbreviation used before as well in the context of benchmarking AIs, but what
I
is
don't
it?
know exactly what it stands for. We can look it up, but it's a common benchmark for, it's called Massive Multitask Language Understanding.
Okay.
It's just a common benchmark used for ranking
Hmm.
performance of different models. It's not super accurate. I think the benchmarks are still something that we haven't figured out yet. Like just because a model is good at this benchmark. I think another thing is that like intelligence is so multifaceted that it's hard to break it down to a single benchmark. And I mean, even
Right.
with human intelligence, right? People try to say like IQ,
IQ.
like that. Yeah, but like there's so many different forms of intelligence. And actually, people who study and research intelligence, they talk about how there's like fluid intelligence and like crystallized intelligence, and there are different forms of intelligence. And so for AI, at least, it depends for different tasks, like different models are
It's funny,
better and
there's like
worse.
for a lot of these things where we try to give it a one score, people always say that, it's very hard to quantify something into just one measure. Even though that's true for so many things, we end up doing it. Like AI is a new thing, right? But we created a new metric. I
Yeah.
think it's just our need and desire to have a simple metric by which we can compare different things, even though
I
it
think
may
it's
not be
like
accurate.
good enough for certain purposes. Actually, an interesting analogy for this I read recently in a book was saying it was making this analogy of intelligence. It said compare this to something like athletic ability. Okay, so you have the Olympics, right? Right now, the Olympics are going on, and there are so many different sports in the Olympics. There's like weightlifting, there's breakdancing now, there's like skiing, there's basketball. So, like, these are all different things and they require different kinds of abilities. Imagine coming up with a metric that you call something like athletic ability that captures like how good you are at athletics. And that's going to totally break down if you try to use that to see who's going to win the Olympics. But I realized that like the one level where it is good is that there's something in common to everyone who's at the Olympics, which makes them very different than like you and me who are
Yeah, yeah,
nowhere near the
yeah,
Olympics. So at least it's capturing that dimension,
yeah.
like that, hey, these guys are all like really high on that, and you and I are pretty far behind. But it is obviously missing a lot of nuance that is specific to those individual activities. So maybe this is something like that, that at a high level, it's okay. It tells you that, yeah, this model is pretty good. But once you get to a deeper level where you're like, oh, actually, I need my model to perform more creative tasks versus someone else is like, I need my model to perform more
That is a good analogy.
programming
I
tasks.
understand. That is a good analogy. In fact, but now that I'm thinking, it's very interesting. If there were to be like one champion of the Olympics, like people would be super interested to know who is this like world Olympian. Like every 4 years, he is the best athlete in the world. Like, right? Like that. Don't you think that that would be something way more popular than having so many different sports? So maybe
Yeah,
there is
but it's
something.
impossible to make that because then people would have to agree on like what is the most important sport then, like
No,
is
no. I mean,
running or
people. I'm sure
weightlifting.
people way smarter than us would have to figure out a way to abstract out what is it that makes these athletes different from normal people, and at an abstract level, like every year it could be a different sport. Like maybe some year it will be a swimmer. Like for example, Michael Phelps, or maybe
Hmm.
there's an easier way to do it, like the person who won the most gold medals or something, right? Like just one common abstracted
Well,
thing,
or
which
it could be something like the person who's won medals across multiple
yeah,
sports or
yeah,
something like
yeah,
that to
yeah,
capture versatility. But
yeah.
I see the point is ultimately it comes down to what is the purpose? It's like, do you want to find the best swimmer? Then the answer is obvious. Or do you want to find the best person who's good at swimming and running? And in the
Right.
case of AI, it could be the same. Like, if you first would start by defining your purpose. And like, do I want to find the best AI for programming? Do I want to find the best AI for creative writing? Do I want to find the best AI for conversation? I think these will all be different things. But
Interesting. So what this MMLU, is this a composite score across different domains? Oh, okay.
yes, so it's like the athletic quotient or
Okay.
IQ is the common thing, but it's still good because I think like to be good at any of these specialized tasks, you first have to be pretty good at a general level. So
Right.
yeah, I think right now it's good. Maybe over time, as we figure out what are the more specialized roles that we need AI to do, there might be specific benchmarks for those. So
So
yeah,
what implications does this new launch have? The fact that this open source model, like how are OpenAI and Google and others like reacting to it? What implications do you think it has for the industry and developers?
Yeah, I think the main implications are that there's going to be less and less value that models can extract. That's the main implication. I think that's something people have been predicting for a while now, which is that if you have the latest and greatest model and you invested like a ton of resources into developing that, okay, that's cool. but there's not much value to it. Like pretty much in a couple of months, there's some open source model, probably Llama or something else, is going to come along and be as good as you, or like 98% as good as you in a couple of months. So I think that's kind of the main implication, is that it makes more sense to focus on providing differentiated experiences that are customized to individual use cases, like we were talking about. Like, go build something that helps with people who need creative writing, go build something that helps people who need to program, and build something that is like serves a specific problem and solves like a specific problem for people,
Right.
rather than the model. So I mean, I guess, I don't know, who is this advice for? Like people who are building companies like OpenAI. I don't think they're listening to us anyway, but I think that that's the main implication, is
Right.
that yeah, there's less value in the model layer of
But
the AI value chain.
let's unpack that. I mean, are you, I don't know. I'm just hearing this for the first time, this analysis that models may not be as much of a moat going forward, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, I always need to think more about this, but let's unpack this. Do you think that that's the case? Like, could OpenAI or Google not do something fundamentally different in the architecture of the model itself that makes a
Yeah,
model?
they could, but I just think whatever new thing they did, that will give them a head start for a few months, 6 months, at
No,
most a
I don't
year.
understand this part. Like, why do you think that is? Is
Because they're all here. Like talent moves, like Meta hires from the same talent pool that these other companies hire from, and you can get access to the same talent. Most of the actual research papers and stuff are actually published in journals that other people can replicate. So I think that it's really impossible to keep this. And the Silicon Valley industry has always been like this. It's not based on like patents and secrets. It's more like a race to who can build the best product first. So there's not much secrecy in the Bay Area, in Silicon
right,
Valley. You
right.
can't really keep something super secret. And actually, that's one of the great things about California, is they have employers sometimes try to institute these non-compete clauses, where if you're employed by a company like say OpenAI, then you cannot, they'll make you sign a contract that says you can't go work at a competitor for X years after that.
Right.
In California, those were declared illegal because it artificially suppresses the wages of employees, and employees are actually free to go wherever they want. So in California, in the Bay Area, there's always been this history of like free flow of talent. So it's just you cannot stop these things when you have a free flow, because ultimately it's just ideas. If you're like, hey, I came up with a new architecture, great. Like some people from your team are probably going to go work somewhere else sometime soon.
Right.
And that's, I think, the advantage of open source being led by a company like Meta, because Meta can do this. Like if you like, what can OpenAI do? They can say, okay, we're going to pay our researchers like millions of dollars so that they don't go anywhere. Meta can come and offer millions of dollars to get those people to join.
What
So
is
yeah.
Meta? What does Meta gain from this? Like, what does Meta gain from making everything open source?
So this, we talked about this in the Apple Intelligence episode. Meta's main problem, or the main thing that Zuck has suffered from, has been like loss of
Mhm.
control over the platform. So Apple controlled the mobile ecosystem, and
Right.
that just fundamentally harmed Meta like so much. It
Right.
just
Right.
limited what Meta could
Right.
do. And so his goal is that he doesn't want the next generation of platform, whatever that's going to be, it'll likely be something with a lot of AI in it. He doesn't want that to be closed and controlled by someone else. So that's his main driving motivation. That's one thing. And the second thing is, in business, there's this philosophy called commoditize your compliments.
Hmm.
So the idea is that whatever like is complementary to your core business, that is not your core, you want that thing to be commoditized, and you want your thing to have the most value. So an example of that would be, suppose like before AI, like say you had the relationship between um, hardware and software. Like So in the case of Apple, for example, like I don't buy an Apple phone because of what chip they have inside. I don't even know. I don't know what processor they have. But I remember back when I was a kid, like when I used to buy PCs, like I would really care about it. I was like, oh, I need to make sure this has the latest Intel processor in it, or it needs to have the latest NVIDIA graphics card in it. Otherwise,
Right.
I'm not going to buy it. But with Apple, for example, I buy it because of the overall experience I'm getting, and I don't care what's underlying it. Like that's just a commodity. And so the idea is that if the things that are underlying your value chain become commoditized, then like you can extract more value because people will pay you. Like, so what is Meta's value? Like it's social connections, right? They
Right.
right now at least, like so they help creators and consumers connect over experiences in Instagram and WhatsApp and Threads and places like that. So and also like advertisers. So there's going to be a ton of AI that's being used to generate the content that's on these platforms, but the AI itself is not what is driving value for Meta. So they don't care. They just want more content to be there on their platforms. So the easier it is for content to make it to the platforms, the easier it becomes for creators to create new content, the easier it becomes for advertisers to create content, the more Meta benefits. So if AI becomes cheaper, then creators are more likely to make more creations, advertisers are more likely to create more
Which is
ads,
obviously
and
not the case with OpenAI because AI is in their name and this is core to what they do. So it's not in their best interest to commoditize what's in their
yeah,
name.
exactly. Yeah. So
Or for Google
that's
as well,
the
who's made such a big bet on AI. Like this is
well, Google actually is an interesting case, and actually, hey, that's the next topic that I had, which
Mhm.
is search, the last topic for today. But before jumping into that, maybe just the last things on this was, in addition to Llama 3.1, they also announced AI Studio, which is a way for creators to create their own AIs, essentially. So suppose you're like a famous Instagram influencer. What's an example? I don't really follow many
I don't have
influencers.
any social media accounts, so
Because I know like YouTubers. I'm big into YouTube. So suppose you're
obviously
like Mr.
Marcus Downey
Beast.
or Mr.
Yeah.
Beast.
Okay. Say you're Mr. Beast. You can create a Mr. Beast AI now and let all your fans interact with that. And you can train it on your own data, give it your own personality,
Like
and
character AI. Do you know what character AI is?
yes, yeah. It is something like that, but on now on a platform that has distribution of like
Right.
billions of people. So yeah, I think that's the idea that people will be able to create new AI characters for people to interact with.
Interesting. Yeah.
Okay, you brought up the point about Google, and you said AI is core to Google, but actually that's not clear because Google's main business is either search or advertising or cloud. AI is just like a component of all of these. So it's not clear to what extent how AI will like play a role in these businesses. But anyway, one of the big announcements that came out in the last month was OpenAI announced that they're launching a competitor to Google Search, which is called SearchGPT.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
Here I can actually show
I should
you.
definitely not be missing such announcements considering how like my livelihood depends on Google search.
Yeah,
Did
let's
they
just
announce
take
anything
a
else? Like what this is it going to be a perplexity
Here,
like
you
thing?
can see it here. Yeah, it's kind of like Perplexity. Here's the prototype. We're looking at their website. It says Search GPT prototype. You can join their waitlist. It was released on July 25th. So in this video, you can see an example of someone searching for how do I find something at Half Moon Bay, and they get an answer with all the time and information, and they get links, and then they can
And
ask
this
a
thing
follow-up
scares me.
question.
It's this has scared me since I first started using Perplexity. Is this is I think a much richer search experience.
Let's look at this example. So someone searched for music festivals in Boone, North Carolina in August. Okay, and here's a whole list of music festivals with info and results and links about them. The user can click on one of the results. Here it says summer concerts at the Jones House, and then there are more links on the left that they can click on. They can scroll through, and now they're asking a follow-up question. Is the Jones House one family friendly? So yeah, they want to know, is this festival
Hmm.
family friendly? And it has all the context and it's answering that question.
Right.
Whereas previously in the case of like Google search, like you just have to create new searches all the time. It loses, there's no context and train of thought and stuff. So
Yeah.
I mean, this is nothing fundamentally new. You've been using Perplexity for a long time, so have I. So it's something like that. But it indicates that this is another market in which there's competition and it's not
Yeah, I
clear
mean,
what.
what scares me about this is not that Google doesn't have the capability to do this. I think Google has had the capability to
Hmm,
like replicate this, or even maybe have had created this much before, much earlier than Perplexity or SearchGPT. It's just that it cannot do it because in
hmm,
doing
hmm,
so,
hmm,
it massively hits its own advertising business, which is in the hundreds of billions of dollars. Like if Google search were to do this, I think it would be a better search experience for the users, but it would cost Google's, and I'm not exaggerating, $100 billion. Because I mean, we make our money. I say we because I work at Google and I sell Google ads, right? Like most of the revenue that Google makes is through search ads, and it depends on showing a bunch of different links and then ads on front of in on top of those links, right? So, and you see in this experience, there are no ads
hmm,
basically, and these guys don't have to show ads because they're not dependent on that model.
hmm.
So, yeah, it kind of
So
scares me.
this, what you just described, is a famous paradox. It's called the innovator's dilemma.
Hmm.
And there was a famous business school professor at Harvard Business School. His name was Clayton Christensen. He recently died like 5 years ago or something. He was amazing, but he researched this essentially. He called it the innovator's dilemma, which is that when a new innovation comes up, there will be incumbents and there will be startups, and the incumbents have to protect what they already have. So even though they might recognize, it's not their stupidity that they don't like use the new innovations, it's that using these new innovations would just kill the company. So it's just a paradox. There's nothing they can do. Either they have to be like, okay, we will totally kill and reinvent ourselves, or they have to protect what they have, knowing that, look, this thing might eat this up in future. And there's literally no solution to this problem.
That's an interesting framework. I learned two new frameworks today: this innovator's dilemma and commoditize what is complementary to your business. Can you think of any examples where someone's figured out the innovator's dilemma? Like any company that maybe has killed their own existing business, reinvented themselves? I don't know. I feel like there should be
I
some.
think like Meta is a really good example of this, and the way they've done it is through
You're like a great
acquisitions.
meta employee. Like if anything's evident through this whole pod, I joke. Go ahead, go ahead.
But I think the way they've done it is through acquisitions, because first, Facebook, the main disruption it ran up against was in the early 2010s mobile. Like Facebook was just desktop based, and then people wanted mobile experiences, and they just didn't have that. And they went and acquired Instagram, and then they made Facebook also mobile first. So yeah, they did that through acquisitions, and then now you can see that Instagram maybe is growing more than Facebook is and stuff. But yeah, I don't know if that was a fundamental
Actually,
like
Meta is a great
dilemma.
example. Like most recently in the 2020s, right? Like Apple disrupted Meta's business, and Mark Zuckerberg kind of reinvented the company. It's not called Facebook. Like that was a huge decision to call it Meta. And look at what's happening to the stock now. I mean, it's not just the company reinvented themselves, but Zuck himself kind of reinvented himself. Did you notice like he looks
Hmm.
so much like
Yeah,
he's transformed
people have
his
been
looks, his
commenting on
body.
that. Yeah,
He's doing jujitsu. He's flying like he's surfing with the American flag in Lake Tahoe. Like he's a very different person now than he was 5 years
yeah.
back. So yeah, maybe yeah.
But that's different, I think, because that was not a disruptive innovation. Like Clayton Christensen, some of the examples he talks about are like with digital cameras, like Kodak, right? Like they could have adopted digital cameras. It's not that they didn't have the technology to do it or not. It's just if they did that, it would have killed their core business, and it didn't make sense for them to do it. So I don't know. I think like companies don't last forever. And I think it's just like this is the natural course of evolution. Like companies die at some point. At some point, Meta and Google like will die. They will not be. I mean, I think we maybe don't see it now. These companies are like at the height of where they are. They're, the biggest companies in the world. But I at some point these companies will die. You can look historically at trends, like how long does a company stay in the S&P 500? It's never forever. Like at some point they die because like some new thing came and that's the end of this era. So we don't know if right now we're in such a moment that's like era defined. I think not personally. Like I think AI is actually turning out to benefit like the incumbents more than disruptors because of the huge advantages in like data and user base and things like that. So yeah, I don't know. But some more interesting things that came out of this in trends in search. One is this Search GPT, so it's going to compete with like Perplexity and Bing and Google and all these people. And then we've talked about like whether AI is like stealing from humans, right? And that issue like comes up a lot in the search space because it's search is
Right.
based on crawling the web. You're crawling public websites, you're taking information from there, and then you're displaying them as responses to user queries. So this is again regulatory situation will be complex here. One news item that was became popular on this topic recently is that Google signed a deal with Reddit that Reddit said that their website content can no longer be indexed by any AI or search or any type of crawler, but they signed a deal with Google, like a multi-million-dollar deal, for Google to get access to Reddit's data for search and for AI and stuff like
Mhm.
that. So I
I
don't know
actually
what that
noticed,
means.
I didn't realize that maybe it has something to do with this announcement. The reason I pay for Perplexity Pro is because it has a feature to select Reddit as the option. So when you search on Perplexity, you get many options. One of
Yeah.
them is Reddit, and that has now disappeared. It just says social, and it doesn't
Yeah,
refer to
I
Reddit
noticed
anymore.
that.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
And so currently Perplexity still gives you Reddit links, but I think pretty soon, once the implications of this
right,
deal are like operationalized, that's not going to be the case in Perplexity anymore. You
yeah,
won't get those Reddit results. You'll have to use Google for that. So it's kind of sad. This is like the fragmentation of the
yeah,
internet again. Like, when the internet first started back in the 90s, the vision was that, hey, it's a universal place where everyone universally has access to all the information and it's completely open. But now it's becoming more and more fragmented and it's all based on like these like deals that people make, like, oh, Reddit, like if I want to access that, I have to go through whichever company made the deal with Reddit, and there's no like just open
yeah,
search of all the information. Like the initial promise was that I'd have all the information in the whole world like at my fingertips, and I think my concern is that that will never happen.
yeah. You're right. I mean, I feel like that about even the AI models. I feel like they were smarter when they launched than they are now. Well, I don't mean the GPT-1 to GPT-4. What I mean is like the first version of GPT-4 was smarter and less censored than it is now. It's just got dumber over time because of all the prompt injection and prompt engineering that's done by default. And just and I don't mean in like the intentions are right. I'm not imputing any malintentions to
Yeah.
the companies. I think there's just a lot of scrutiny and like these people who are
Yeah.
mad about their data being taken. So like I feel like a lot of the amazing things that I saw in the output of the models earlier just don't exist anymore. They're still
But
amazing.
we talked about this before, right? There's also a trade-off between how good the models are right now and how well are you incentivizing like future creation. If the
Right,
model
right.
now
I
is so
understand.
good that like people are not incentivized to create things anymore because they're just going to be sucked up by the model,
Right,
that's
right,
also a bad outcome. So yeah, it's a pretty challenging like landscape to navigate. I'm really curious how this turns out.
right. So so if I summarize all the updates that you shared, it sounds like there's a lot of competition. Meta is challenging the closed source models. OpenAI is challenging incumbent search players like Google, and like yeah, it's very interesting. It's like at the end, it should be good for the users like you and I, with
Hmm.
competition. But we'll see how this all plays out. It's very interesting.
Yeah,
Sure.
and I'm sure when we revisit this in a month or two, and do another like news episode, things would have changed and there will be like a bunch of new things by
Yeah,
then.
for sure. So one takeaway from this action item on us is to do a deep dive on open source versus closed source. Maybe it can be a shorter episode, but I would
Yeah,
love to deep
I
dive
think that
into
would be
the
good.
implications
Yeah,
of that.
cool.
All right, man.
All
Thank you
right.
so much. This is amazing. Yeah, I feel like
Yeah,
you.
and thank you to our listeners and whoever has made it till the end. As always, please remember to leave us a rating or review and write to us. Let us know your thoughts and what you'd like to hear in future or any questions you have.
All right.
All right, see you next time. Bye.
This, I